And what is up, everyone? I'm Joe DeHoyos. I am the host of Beyond the Woodlines, and today I have with me author Gare Allen. How you doing, Gare?
I'm doing well. Good evening, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. You almost made me cry because we were talking about our dogs that have passed, and before we came on, and I'm serious, man. I will get choked up if I talk about Atlas too long. I don't even like to say his name sometimes because
Yep.
it, uh,
Oh
it
yeah,
brings
I'm at
back.
the point where if I know in a movie that the dog isn't going to make it, I'm not watching that movie. So
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm just not going to do it.
yeah, yeah, man. I remember watching what was the one with Tom Hanks, Turner and Hooch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, even though I wasn't young, but I was probably, I don't know, late teens when I saw that. Yeah, yeah, that was tough for me to watch.
Did you
Yeah,
see
so,
Five Below?
yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
man,
Now
that
that
was
was
tough.
done very well back,
It
and
was.
I actually saw that. I think it might have been before I got a dog, or maybe right when I got a dog. It was that long ago. But I could not watch it today. There's no way I could watch it
Yeah,
today after being on my second generation of dogs as an adult. No way.
yeah, yeah. I don't know what it is. I guess dogs have such a personality, and I don't want to say they're the best pet, but they're definitely in a category on their own. You know,
They're always happy to see me. And no, I can't say that about anybody else that I know. So there's
right?
something to that.
I can't remember who said it. I want to say it was Mike Tyson. I don't want to quote him wrong, but I think it was him that said, "Lock your girlfriend up in the closet for 24 hours, and lock your dog up in the closet for 24 hours, and see who's happy to see you when you open the door."
It's true.
Yeah, you know.
That's funny.
Oh man, yeah, I love dogs, but yeah, man. I was on Facebook and I came across your. I don't even know what group it was in, but I saw you and I started stalking you a little bit, and I saw your books, man, and that's what really kind of drew me to you and got me interested. But before we get into your books, what got you into the whole paranormal field?
So I had two things kind of happen in my life. So when I was 12 years old, I had a strange experience where my bed actually levitated off the ground in my bedroom, and it was a strange evening. I went to bed, and my bedroom was at the top of the stairs, and so I went to bed, and I had the family dog at my feet and sleeping on the bed with me, and all of a sudden the bed wobbled and it lifted up, and I hadn't fallen asleep yet, and so I was kind of trying to figure out what was happening, and before I could do anything, it just fell back down with a thud. And it was probably only up for a couple of seconds and in a couple of inches, but it was enough that my limbs moved when I went back down. The dog jumped up, kind of giving me confirmation that I wasn't just imagining something there. And right at that moment, my older brother had been coming up the stairs, and he opened the door and he said, "What was that noise?" And I said, "Okay, I got further confirmation that something did actually happen. I wasn't dreaming it." And I didn't say anything. I probably looked terrified, and he probably chalked it up to another weird little brother moment, and just went on with his day. But that stuck with me for a long time. And then when I was 25, I turned into a plaza, and there was a metaphysical bookstore, and I don't know why. I literally was driving home, and I just turned in, and I went into this bookstore, and I probably spent every day there for the next month getting a new book. I couldn't read them fast enough, and I was just devouring everything metaphysical, everything paranormal. And I to this day, I don't know what made me do that, but I had decided on that day that that was my new hobby. And now here I am, 25, 30 years later, and I've written 15 books,
Oh
most of
wow,
them about my paranormal and metaphysical experiences, and like everybody else, trying to make sense of them and understand, what it's all about.
yeah, yeah. So what actually made you decide I need to write about this? Was there a moment?
Yeah, so when I first started reading the metaphysical books, reincarnation was a big one for me. I couldn't get enough of that. The thought that we live different lives and they were affecting us now in a way, it made perfect sense. If a 3-year-old almost drowns in a pool and the adult is scared of swimming, any therapist will tell you that makes sense to them. So in my mind, and I'm like I said before, I'm kind of a left brain guy, a very analytical guy. It has to make sense to me in that way. And whether I drowned in the previous life that was 10 years earlier than my childhood or my childhood doesn't really matter. If the memory's there, the memory's there. So it really gave me some good insight. So what happened was I had an experience. So up until that point in my mid 20s, I couldn't sleep with covers on my legs. I couldn't wear pajamas. I was very claustrophobic where my legs were concerned. Really weird. No idea why. And I tapped into this lifetime, the most recent one, where I was in a wheelchair for the last 11 years of my life. And once I kind of got into it and experienced it and remembered things, that went away. I could have the blankets on, I could wear pajamas if I wanted. It all just went away and it clicked in my head. So I started reading about divination and astral projection and alien abduction and all these other, all these other crazy things that I never even considered before. And to answer your question, I wanted to write a metaphysical 101 book to kind of share my experiences and say, this is what happened to me and this is how it helped me. Because I started, meditating and I started getting dreams that helped me make better decisions. And, they said, okay, if a situation comes up, go this way, not that way. And I really started to have a better life and make better choices at work and hang around better people. And all these things started to happen. And it was because I was really getting into my spirituality. And so I said, I really want to write a metaphysical, 101 book and kind of break down these things for people and kind of give them like a workbook or a guidebook. And so I tried to write it and it was awful. And so I put it away for a few years. And then I went back and then I wrote a series of 7 books. There's 7 short stories called 7 Lessons. And they chronicle everything that had happened to me during that period in my 20s when I had started to devour everything metaphysical. So that was the reason why I wanted to put pen to paper at that time. Now, these days, I write about my life too. I write about my dogs. I write about the loss in my life. It's more preserving the memory because I'm 53 and I'll remember, hey, remember when we went to that show in Clearwater? And they said, no, that was in St. Pete. So I'm remembering things, but I'm messing up the details a little bit. And I want to preserve those memories. And of course, my paranormal memories also. So now I'm writing now to sort of preserve those memories.
Right, right. So how did you tap into reincarnation specifically for yourself?
So a friend of mine at the time, craziest birthday gift ever, gave me a certificate for a hypnotic regression, and I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently, you can buy a gift certificate for that at that Metaphysical Academy. And so I'll never forget her name. Her Reverend June G. Blitzer was her name, and this sweet woman regressed me back. And of course, I had trouble. I'd never done it before, and of course, in my mind, I was just making up things, and so it was hard for me to buy into it. But she was very experienced, and she had met that kind of normal opposition, and doubt before, and she really took her time and talked me through it. And I just started to drift back, and I was lucky enough to meet a psychic who we became very, very close friends very quickly. And we had a shared life together, and I was able to get confirmation of who we each were in that life without telling each other. So we would both have separate regressions, and we'd compare it, and it would match. And there were too many details to discount it as coincidence. There's just too many. And believe me, I tried to debunk it. Again, that's how I take things in. And so I just couldn't get enough of it after that. And 7 Lessons, the 7 short stories. I focus on astral projection and all these other things and alien abduction, but the story that weaves through the books is a huge story of reincarnation, of people coming back together over and over and then growing as a result of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I've really gotten here recently, the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. I've really uh, have gotten into the reincarnation, and like I said, I've read everything. I've looked on YouTube, checked out every video. It's something that I'm really interested in, and I've been wanting to do that myself, get regressed, and for other reasons too, just to see if there's anything else going on here in my life. But
There's the first book I read, and again, I'll never forget it. It was Brian Weiss, Dr. Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, and he had regressed hit one of his patients, and he by accident she went back even further than her childhood. And at first he's like, okay, you're not, there's something's wrong. And then he basically just documented every time she would go back to her previous life, he would just document it. And little by little, different issues, fears, and challenges she had disappeared as a result of going into certain lifetimes where they stemmed from. And again, he presents the book like this is what happened. I'm not telling you she went to a past life. I'm telling you what she told me.
Right.
And so you make your own judgment. And I love when people present information like that and
Yeah.
say, hey, here's what happened.
Right.
So, this is my filter and my take on it. But I'm not going to tell you how to view this. I'm telling you this is what happened to us.
Right. And I can definitely appreciate that view because I do the same thing. Especially like when someone comes up to me and talks to me about Bigfoot and they tell me this is what I saw, this is what I experienced. I don't tell that person, well, that's not what happened. You know,
Yeah.
I listen to their story and I just kind of take it with a grain of salt sometimes. I just and I think it's okay for us to make up our own mind. As to what happened or what didn't happen. I think that's if we do it the right way, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, no, and in some cases, everybody can be right because, forgive me, I'm not huge into the Bigfoot phenomenon, but I know there's a Bigfoot in one area, but then it's called something else in the cold, snowy region, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
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 So who's to say that this doesn't act like you think, and this other one doesn't behave like somebody else had experienced? There could be different, people behave differently, so
Yeah.
maybe different Bigfoots behave differently. But the only thing I've kind of thought to myself about Bigfoot was they've got to be disappearing into some sort of another dimension or another time space. They have found a way to conceal them that goes beyond greenery in a cave, right? At this point, there must be disappearing. They must come into this reality for something, and then they phase out somehow. That's the only thing I can come up with, which kind of makes me think that then they're probably, I don't know, extraterrestrial, or they found portals on Earth where they can disappear too. So that's the only thing I've really come to think about Bigfoots and make some kind of determination as to what they're about.
Yeah, I certainly have heard people talk about the portals opened up and they seen the Bigfoot walk through, and it's kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes. But when you hear, several people talk about it in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, you gotta listen to it. You can't just say, you're you're
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, somebody's got to be right, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, people in the UFO field they will say they're aliens. People in the paranormal field will say they're paranormal, and people in the Bigfoot world will just say they're flesh and blood creatures. So, uh, and they probably are. Everyone's probably right to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that too. Are ghost aliens? That's a great question that people have asked quite a bit, and it's like, well, if they're on another plane of existence, the astral plane or whatever you want to call it, just slightly out of phase with ours, it stands to reason that other beings can exist there as well, right? So maybe sometimes they are humans that passed over, maybe sometimes they're aliens. I don't know. And then maybe Bigfoot can actually take a route through there as well. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time on the astral, so I'm not totally sure, but
Yeah, yeah. But we'll get back to the paranormal. um, have you ever gone on investigations or visited different sites?
So I have done some of it. I'm not a paranormal investigator. That's not something that I actively did. But as it turned out in 1999, I bought a home, the one I currently live in. And unbeknownst to us, the previous owner had killed himself in the house, suicide. And guess what? We had a ghost. And from the out of the gate, things were happening, crazy things. And they were pretty benevolent for the most part. A lot of things going missing, banging on the wall, banging on the windows, blinds being, smacked by an invisible hand, my dogs, barking at nothing in a corner, that sort of thing. Crazy dreams in the beginning. And so as I dug deeper into the situation, and I wrote about this, I wrote a book called The Dead, and people had asked me about my previous work, did that stuff really happen to you? And I said, yeah, but I wrote it in a fictional setting. I said, you know what, let me write down everything that happened to me up to this point, which was 2014. I said, everything that's happened to me literally from my perspective. And so I basically just journaled my life in The Dead. And this story of the house features prominently in that. So it turned out that the wife had left and he was very distraught. And so after he killed himself, unfortunately, one of the neighbor kids actually found him, and they had found an altar set up and there was a lot of strange things. Something very much described as like Santeria or voodoo or something along that line. With different objects and animal parts and things like that. It was very disturbing. And come to find out, after having I had a demon experience, my first and only to date, that he had dabbled in that, and that he had actually. So I had a ghost, but he had actually brought forth some sort of demon creature as well.
Right.
So I was sleeping one night, and it was a really weird night. I couldn't get to sleep. I was very anxious, and I kept tossing and turning, and I had my shirt off, and I laid on my side, and I felt two fingers push into my ribs, and enough that it rocked my body. All right. So of course I flip out, I turn over, and then I get sleep paralysis. Now I'm frozen, and I can see out of the corner of my eye there's something kind of off to the side, and this horribly burned face with yellow eyes and wiry whiskers. It just sort of reaches over, leans over, and he's like inches from my face, just looking at me, like studying me, like, who are you, or what are you doing here? And I can kind of see a tail like kind of off behind him, and it only happened for a few seconds, and one of his whiskers actually touched my chin, and as soon as he made contact I was able to move again.
Huh.
And he jumped up, I jumped up, but it flew out of my room. And as it ran out of my room, it started going towards the front bedroom, which is where the previous owner had killed himself. And as he ran, all the dogs jumped up and started chasing what should have been, an invisible thing, but I could see it. And it
Right.
ran into the front room and slammed the door behind it. So by the time I caught up, all of my dogs are barking at this closed door. And I'm like, my heart is pounding. I'm like, what just happened? And there's a lot more to the story. Like I said, you can read it in The Dead, but that room, I closed the vent. I'm in Tampa, Florida, and it stayed cold in that room. It's no room is cold in Florida unless you're cranking the air and you got the fan in the and that in Texas, right? It's like
Yeah, man.
it's not
It's
easy to keep a
terrible
room
right now.
cool. So but long story short, I was able to eventually pull in the help of a modern day shaman. Which is what it took to banish that demon from the house.
Okay. And what about I guess the previous occupant? Did he hang around?
He did not. He finally left. But excuse me, then something strange started to happen. And I have a friend of mine named Joni Mayhem. You may be friends with her on Facebook, but very well known paranormal author and paranormal investigator in New Harmony, Indiana. And she would always talk about how she'd do these investigations and she'd bring home a hitchhiker and she'd bring home a ghost. And I thought that was crazy. And I was like, well, I don't want to bring anybody home, but then, I was really kind of just working and writing, and I wasn't going to places where I might find an attachment, so to speak. And it was funny, not long after that, I started to have experiences happen in the house, and I would reach out to that shaman friend of mine, and yeah, something had gotten through the house. Now I do like a holy water sea salt barrier outside of the house, and keep the house pretty positive, but they can get in. I mean, the last time I had something significant happen, well, most recently I did, but before that, I was looking at a house. I was thinking about moving, and the daughter of the parents who had passed were showing it to us. And they had lived in this home for like 60 years, and the husband had built like every wooden piece of furniture with his bare hands. This house was these people's essence, and I could feel it. And I was like, this is not me. This house belongs to the family. It needs to stay in the family. And I almost said that, but I didn't want to be rude. But I remember thinking, that no, they didn't want me to buy it. And that night, I went to bed and I got up in the middle of the night, and I go to walk in the bathroom, and a towel just flies across from the sink to the shower. I mean, it didn't fall to there; it flew across, and I just knew it was this older lady that came home with me to make sure I didn't buy that house. But anyway,
Yeah.
I reached out to my shaman friend, and I didn't tell him anything. I said, "Hey, I had some activity. Can you kind of remotely check it out and cleanse my house?" So he sends me a message the next day, and he said, "Yeah." He goes, "It was an older lady that was in your house."
Oh.
He goes, "But she was harmless." And I was like, and I didn't tell him anything. So it kind of made me think, it's like, so again, I don't know why she came home. But I guess, like I said, just to make sure I didn't go back and buy the house, maybe.
Yeah. 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 That's actually kind of sweet. I think.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's funny though, in the middle of the night, the towel goes flying, and I'm like, okay, just another Tuesday, right? I'm like, okay, I'll just call my shaman friend, because that's what you do in a normal world.
So, real quick, Hatman. Are you familiar with the Hatman entity?
I've heard of it, but I'm not super familiar with them.
Oh,
No.
he's actually on my poster right behind me too. Hatman, up at top, middle.
Yeah, I've seen
Okay,
pictures before.
right. So I I myself have had an encounter with him. He came in my room one night. I was maybe 20, 21. Yeah, he came into my room and stood over my bed, scared the hell out of me. Um, and then he left abruptly. But it's really a long story. But the reason why
Well,
I was talking about him is because when you talked about moving into the house, uh, it reminded me of a story of a friend of mine. He moved into a house where someone had committed suicide, um, but he didn't know about it until he actually moved in. Uh, him and his wife had drove by the house. They saw it; it was up for rent. It was only a couple of streets away from his father-in-law. So they're like, "Hell, we let's get this house," you know. So they went and they saw them doing remodeling on the kitchen, and they walked in there like, "Hey, whose house is this?" We saw the for rent sign, and the lady comes out. She goes, "This is my house. You know, it belonged to my father. I'm gonna have it ready in a couple of weeks." And so my friends like, we like the house already. Let's work out a deal. So they did. They worked out a deal. The lady said, in a couple of weeks, the house will be ready. Y'all can move in then. Him and his wife were like, fine. Yeah, we'd love to move in. 2 weeks later, they're moving all their stuff in. Neighbor from across the street comes over and says, "Hey, you got Jack's house?" And he's like, "I don't know who Jack is." He goes, "Yeah, Jack was the old man that lived here. He died." And my friend's like, "Well, we didn't know him, but we met his daughter. She's the one who rented the house out to us." He said, "Yeah, Jack, uh, he was terminally ill. He had cancer, and he was done with it. And so he killed himself in the kitchen. He actually shot himself in the head in the kitchen." And that made sense to Richard because uh, my friend, because they were remodeling the kitchen. They were taking out all the cabinets and stuff. So he goes to the cabinets before they put anything up, and he finds a hole where they spackled over a hole in the sheetrock. So that night, he's trying to scare his wife. He's turning on the lights and turning them off and on, saying, "Jack's gonna get you. Jack's gonna get you." You know. And so by doing that, I think he invoked this Hat Man because after that, he said they were seeing this guy walk down the hall. He said he was asleep in his room one day and he was laying in bed watching TV, and he said he saw the guy walk right through past his doorway. And I asked him, I said, was he like a solid figure? Was he transparent? He goes, no. He goes, he looked like a real man, like a solid man, real tall. And he said, man, I got up and grabbed my shotgun and went to the house. Nobody was there. And it's funny because he actually fell asleep on the couch holding the shotgun. And when his wife got home, she saw him on the couch, asleep on the, asleep on the couch with a shotgun in his hand. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? And he tells her what he saw. And then even after that, he would come into work because he used to work nights. He would get off real late at night. He worked second shift, and his wife and their little girl would go wait at her dad's house for him to get home. And uh, he would see him in the kitchen or like in the living room. He could see him through the windows. And then one day, his little girl wakes up in the middle of the night, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, screaming bloody murder. She was only like 4 or 5 years old at the time, and she was laying face first on the floor. She fell out of her toddler bed. The toddler beds are only maybe like a foot high off the ground, right? So he gets there, and her tooth is like knocked out. They couldn't even find her tooth, but they could see it where it was like ripped, like the roots came out through her top part of her gum,
Oh
like
my
it came
gosh.
out this way. And he finally found it was like 10 feet away from her. He was like, "We don't know how that happened." He goes, "Kids fall down all the time, take terrible spills, and nothing happens to them." And here she is laying face first on the carpet with her tooth 10 feet away from her. You know,
Wow.
so they think this entity had something to do with that. And then the father-in-law was walking his dog. He had a boxer. He was walking his dog, and as he walked by my friend's street, he looked down and he saw this guy in a long trench coat with a hat, all in black, looking into my friend's house. He was standing in the street looking at my friend's house. So he walks down to the next street, makes a right to come make a U-turn. And when he comes down my friend's street, the guy's walking away. So him and his dog's barking, going, he's going apeshit at this point too, and his dog doesn't do that either. So when they got down to the street, they saw the guy made a right turn. The guy wasn't even there anymore. It was like the guy disappeared, and yeah, so they didn't stay in that house too much longer. They wound up getting out of there.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I didn't know either. I was unloading the U-Haul, and some of the neighbor kids came up on their bikes, and they're like, "Are you moving in?" I'm like, "Yep." And they're like, "Do you know the history of the house?" And I'm like, "Nope." And
Yeah.
so they filled me in. Kids love to be the informants, and I'm like,
Yeah.
so I called the realtor and I said, "Did you know?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I go, "You didn't think to tell me?" And she's like, "Well, would it have changed your mind?" I said, "Well, you would have gotten less for the house." And unfortunately, in Florida, it's not a law that you have to disclose that,
Oh,
unfortunately.
really?
And she said, "Well, legally, I didn't have to tell you." And I said, "Well, ethically, you might have."
Right.
But it's funny, when I first looked at the house, it had been vacant for 4 months. So it was really, the carpet was dirty and the pool was green, and it was really in bad shape. But I was like, okay, it's just aesthetics. But in the front bedroom, I remember that the carpet was black, just stained black, and that was the room he shot himself in. So when I went when I came back a couple weeks later and looked at it for a second time, and before I bought it, they had replaced all the carpet, and I kind of forgot about all that. But
Mm.
like you said about that hole, there was a hole right. I'm pointing to it because that's the other side of this wall here. But there was a little putty hole, and I could put my finger through it. And I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's really strange. But
So is this
yeah,
Hatman attached to suicides and murders and devastating things like that? Is that when he shows up?
I was going through a bad time in my life when he showed up.
So he kind of probably comes in when things are down and dark and
Yeah, like I said, I don't know if he comes as a warning. Hey, you need to straighten your ass out or something, or uh, um, I don't know what happened with at my friend's house. If he was responsible for his little girl getting her tooth knocked out,
oh,
or maybe something else was, because they would have, like he said, the ceiling fans would go like beyond full speed. He said they were just take off like unbelievably fast. They could plug in like an iron or blow or their hair dryer. They'd come back to it and be unplugged. Uh, TVs would come on and off. You know,
oh yeah.
it would just get really really cold in the house, and they would get mad at each other for turning down the thermostat. They're like, "I'm not doing that." So something was keeping the house really really cold, and they had a bunch of strange stuff that happened there. So I'm sure that whatever happened was that my friend still to this day, his little girl, she's like 24, 25. He still blames himself for all that. And
Oh.
yeah, he says that, man, if I hadn't been doing that, he thinks he invoked something there at the house by playing around.
Yeah, I messed around with a Ouija board during all of that stuff that was going on in the house, and which at the time was sounded like a great idea. So, you know, I learned my lesson with that, but I had something pretty terrifying happen. I One day I was like, okay, my buddy came over, we're going to the gym, and so I grabbed the Ouija board out of the dresser, and he was like, "What are you doing with that?" I said, "I'm gonna get rid of it." I said, "There's weird stuff happening." I said, "I'm blaming the Ouija board. I'm done with it." And so we literally drove to the gym, and there was one of those donations, that have like a very small opening, you could put in just clothes or shoes. And I
Right, right.
slid it in there, and I go, "There you go." And the next day, same thing. Came home from work, buddy came over for the gym. And before he got there, I had opened up the dresser drawer, and it was back in my drawer. And I took it out and I set it on the dining room table, and I just was staring at it. And when he came over, he goes, "I thought you got rid of that." And I go, "Thank you," because I thought I was losing my mind. So it came back. So we had to switch gears, and then it got burned in the backyard at that point. So it didn't come back after that, thank God.
Yeah. And I've heard stories about that, how like people will throw away the Ouija board and it comes back. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not like. I'm like, no. And then that really told me that there was some sort of attachment to it, and I didn't think it didn't feel healthy. I didn't want anything to do with it. Plus, here I was having there's a disembodied spirit. There's demon running around. What am I doing? Opening another portal with the Ouija board? How can that be a good
Yeah.
idea? right?
Yeah, that's funny. So, do you have any abilities, psychic abilities, or mediumship?
Um, so I'm the short answer is no, but I dream like there's no tomorrow, and I often will have prophetic dreams that tell me what's coming up very soon. But they're usually dreams about something very important, and they'll actually show me acting one way in the outcome, and then another way in the other outcome. So I'm not sure that. So I would say no, I don't have abilities, but I have opened myself up to my spirit guides or whoever wants to give me a message. I am open to that. So I work very hard to stay connected and really look for the signs. And they're really good about using songs and license plates and things like that to give
Right.
me some pretty clear messages. So we've kind of created a shorthand over the years, like I said, with songs and license plates and other things to get their message across. Um, but I did read tarot for a while and I was able to tune into people, but it was mostly I couldn't get detail. I couldn't get time. Time was never something that I could nail down. I could see male or female or a job, but I couldn't get any specifics or things like that. And it takes a lot of energy, I think, unless you're already gifted. And I was more interested in putting on my regression tapes and going back into a past life. That I was passionate about that. So I really didn't have a lot of passion to be a reader. How about you?
Yeah, I just got into like oracle cards last, 4 or 5 months. I've got like 3 sets of oracle cards. Uh, and like you, man, I recently just opened myself up. Over about the last 2 years, I've started meditating, started opening myself up to, my spirit guides, um, and I've gotten really, really good at it, and they've gotten really good at communicating with me. And like you said, just the weirdest. I don't look at a bird pooping on my car as a sign. I'm not like that. But I see stuff and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This
Yeah.
is I'm doing the right thing, or I'm doing the wrong thing, or this is definitely a message. And like I think songs have a lot to do with it. Um,
Yep.
Certain visualizations, I guess you could say. I'll see stuff, imagery. You know, uh, Owls have become really, really big here lately. Even snakes. And I take them as positive signs when I see them, and I think that let me know that I'm on the right track when I see these owls and snakes, and I see them everywhere I go now, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
No.
Yeah.
It's funny you say owl because I was going through some stuff. I wasn't sure what direction to go to, and so I said, "Hey, I need a sign. Am I being smart doing this? Is this the smart path?" I think is how I worded it exactly.
Right.
And I've lived in this house since '99, and there's hawks and wildlife, but I had never seen an owl and until that night, and I haven't seen one since. But I went out to the backyard, let the dogs out, and this owl was maybe 15 feet above me in a palm tree, and it was the brown Florida owls are just massive. I mean, they're 2.5 feet tall. They're huge and they got giant heads. And this thing was just sitting there staring at me, and I was like, "Good lord!" And it flew. It sat there for a little bit, and then it dropped and its wings caught the air, and I could feel the air on me from the wings flapping. But the point is, it's like the wise bird, and I was like,
Right.
I got my answer. And so I've like I said, I've really learned to look. And another thing my guides do is, and I find it interesting, and I'm not sure if it was a lesson for me. It probably was, but to me, it's like I guess when I was younger, if you didn't have experiences or I'm not going to say credentials, but if I didn't think you knew what you were talking about, I wouldn't really pay attention to what you were saying. And that's wrong because everybody's got their own experiences and everybody's got something a different perspective that they can add to everything that's happening. And so I started to get messages from the most unlikely sources, a stranger or a child, that someone I would normally dismiss as not really paying attention to them, but
Right.
that I would get those messages from them, and they would be very pertinent and make sense and resonate with me. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And so working in retail for many years, you come into contact with a lot of people that
Right.
it's a quick brush, right? So I've learned to pay attention over the years. When someone stops me and talks to me, I really stop and kind of give them my attention because I'm not sure if there's a nugget there that I'm supposed to get.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? And I've always been that same way. I could be in an elevator, just going from one floor to the next floor, and someone will be in there with me, and he'll tell me their whole life story. You know, and I'm like, okay, dude, I'm just trying to get up to the next floor.
Yeah.
And they'll tell me everything. I'd be at the grocery store, and somebody would stop me and just talk to me, or doctor's office, wherever, and just tell me everything. And I'm like, okay. And I used to kind of like let it go in one ear and out the other, but now I listen to a lot more because, like you said, there might be something in there that
Yeah.
I'm supposed to listen to. I'm supposed to hear.
And at the very least, if it's somebody who doesn't get a lot of human contact and they're really enjoying their outing and they just want to talk to somebody because they don't have a lot of people to talk to, then how's it going to kill me to go from floor 3 to 7 and listen to listen to a little bit of their life, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? And as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate that. Not just trying to see if there's something in it for me, but I guess what is in it for me is I get to listen to someone else's story.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's fun. Sometimes I get a kick out of it, and I really like listening to older people talk. Uh, I think there's that that little stigma that old people just talk. When I was your age, Sonny, this is what I was doing, right? But really, when you listen to someone older talk, it's like you're going back in time, and you're like, wow, that's
Yeah.
really cool. And I wish sometimes these older people would write their stories down and put them in a book, or something.
Yep. And like I said, I started to mess up my details a little bit. And my mother passed around the time, and so okay, now I really got to get all this done. So I wrote a book called Two's Company, Three's a Pack, because it basically, the main story is I had two dogs for 3 years. Life was fine, and then I got a third, and it became a pack. And suddenly they all wanted to be in charge, and it was this constant battle of alpha dogs. And it really, it's told in a humorous way, but these poor dogs, they never seriously hurt each other, but they had their moments. But in between all of that, my mother passed, and I learned a lot. I was in the pet industry, and I was actually a regional manager in charge of dog training and grooming. So I was really immersed in the animal world for a long time. And I learned a lot from the dynamic of two dogs going to three dogs, different breeds, a different upbringing and that sort of thing, because they were all rescues. So they all came with a little bit of a history as well.
Yeah.
And so it was just very interesting. But, they brought immense love to the house. And of course, when they passed, it was this devastating moment, yet we keep doing it over and over. But anyway, I got that book out, and I was able to also thank the people in my life who were there during those devastating moments and really rallied around me. And so I have never read it since I wrote it. I'll probably read it many, many years down the road, but I'll probably remember fondly. But a lot of my mother's memories are preserved in there to make sure I didn't forget those after her passing. So yeah, anybody who's got experiences they don't want to forget. None of my books have been a New York bestseller. It's okay, but they're going to be an amazing reference for me, in a few years, when I'm old and gray.
Right. Um, so, were you close with your mom?
Yeah, I was very close with my mother, actually. So she had actually gone through a major surgery, and I was her caretaker at the end there. So unfortunately, my mother passed in my house, which was pretty devastating. And I was the one that found her. So that was yeah, that was a pretty tough week. But my family and my friends and everybody really rallied together. And I don't remember much about the week, but there was a lot of tough times afterward because. And this is a crazy, and I wrote about this because it was very strange to me. I said, wait a minute, has my mother passed on? Did she become a ghost? What is, these weird things went into my head, right? Because there are ghosts. And I needed to know she was at peace. That was like my driving force for a long time. Is my mother at peace? And because I had dreams, but they didn't make sense. Suddenly my dreams got warped and weird. And of course, when you're that close to something, it's hard to be objective, right? If I dreamed about somebody else's family, I could tell you what happened, but it was my own. So I was misinterpreting it or over-interpreting it. It was very tough for me. And so I had an amazing experience. I come home I'm at the gym and I'm kind of telling my workout partner all my crazy thoughts about it. And God love him. He just listened to me. He didn't know what to say, but he was cool about it. But I get home and I let the dogs outside and there's no one else here. There's no TV, there's no radio. It is complete silence. And I take out my phone, and I was going to send him a quick text and say, "Hey, thanks for listening, to my nonsense. I appreciate it," or whatever. And I hit the record to text, and as soon as it beeped off. And I said, "Okay, it's done that before." But when I went to hit it again, I looked at the screen, and in that millisecond, it had recorded two words: "Mom, good." And I was like, I got my message, I got my confirmation, and I was able to release. I don't know. I probably crumbled at the time. I just released this amount of worry and stress,
Right.
and it was the most amazing gift. And I don't know if my mother was at peace. How could she send it? It probably wasn't her. Somebody sent it to me. Somebody let me know that,
Yeah.
hey, this is something you don't need to worry about. Give your energy to
Right.
something else. And so that was an amazing experience I had.
Yeah. I spent a long time guilty about my dad passing, and I always felt him around, and I think that's why he was always around, telling me you don't need to feel guilty about it. Because the morning that he passed, he was in a hospice, and he was right down the street from my job, like 5 minutes down the street. And I was running late to work that morning, and I was like, man, do I go see my dad? 'Cause I would always go see my dad in the morning before I go to work, but I woke up late, and I was gonna make that right turn. I said, you know what? I'm already late to work. I got to go to work. So I went to work, and then he wound up passing away that morning. And I always felt bad
Yeah.
about that. I always felt
Um,
like I should have been there because he was alone when he passed. But I think it, that was just him telling me because I beat myself up for it for a long, long, long time, for years. It's been 10 years since he passed, and I've just recently, within the last couple of years, kind of got over that. And I think he was always around trying to tell me to quit beating myself up about it. You know,
I'm
but
sorry. You watch a lot of these shows with mediums and psychics, and they talk to people that have passed over, and they'll say, a lot of people said, they said I wasn't able to say goodbye, and they said they didn't wait for you because they didn't want you to see them. They didn't want that to be the last memory.
right,
There was a wonderful memory, and they knew you wanted to preserve that memory as
right,
opposed to seeing them in that deteriorated, unhealthy state or whatever. And so I
right,
think sometimes things work out that way, and that you know it was better to go that way. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah,
Unfortunately, like I said, don't get a whole lot of communication once they pass over.
yeah. I'll tell you a pretty cool story. I actually moved outside of San Antonio in 2017. I moved out there for a couple of years, and uh, like I said, I just always can tell when my dad's around, and I always just feel it. And one day I was throwing some clothes downstairs to my daughter to throw in the washing machine for me, and there's a light switch which was like arm's length away from me, and it clicked on, and the light came on in the hallway, and I kind of lifted the light switch, and I was like, damn, I said that was dad. That's who it was. That's who turned the light on. It had to be my dad. Like I said, I lived out there for a couple of years, and I came back home to Houston, moved back here, and I was at my mom's house, and I was telling my mom, yeah, I think dad dad followed me to San Antonio to keep an eye on me, make sure I was doing okay. And I started telling her that same story about the light switch, and as soon as I finished that story, the light switch in the kitchen came on. It just flicked on. Yeah,
Ah,
and my
love it.
mom, my mom was, she was standing on, in my mom's living room. She's got a bar that connects to the kitchen. She was sitting on the bar looking at me as I'm talking. I'm leaning on the sink in the kitchen, and the light switch flicks on. You just comes right on. The light comes on, and
Wow.
my mom was like, "Yep, that was your dad." I said, "Yeah, that was him."
And I think when someone passes, we all, at least now, especially now that I've had a wonderful moment after they pass, telling me that, hey, they're there, and they're okay. It's like, I think I want that every time somebody passes in my life. Now I expect it. I'm like, so I tell my friends, I'm like, when you go, I gotta have something. I don't care what
Yeah,
it is, but you better make something flip around or drop something. I don't know,
yeah,
or figure it
yeah,
out.
cause I'm gonna do it. I guarantee you, I'm gonna do it. Yeah,
Yeah, we better do. If you're into the paranormal, you really should do something spectacular when you pass because they
yeah, oh
expect
yeah,
it of us, right? It's
yeah, yeah. I will try to make it as spectacular as possible. But, so your book right there behind you, Ghost Crimes. What is that? What is that about?
So I told you I wrote the first series of books in 7 lessons that chronicled my metaphysical journey, and I wrote it in a fictional narrative. So I wrote a book called Ghost Crimes back in 2018, and it was based on actual cases. And what had happened was I had some experiences where my neighbors had some demonic activity when I was very young, but I remember hearing the stories, and so I guess it's inspired is a better word. Based means that it was. I mean, the neighbors all knew that it happened. The police showed up, and the mother had really done some crazy things, and that was documented. But it started to get me thinking about first responders and EMTs and firefighters and police and detective and sheriffs and all these folks that put their lives on the line for us, and they go out and they run into these cases, and there's always not always an explanation as to why someone was hurt or murdered. And someone may say it wasn't me, it was a ghost, and of course that's crazy. But the more I dug into it, I realized that when police cases are written, there's a code that they use for the case number, and one number will be like the state, the city, the county, the type of crime, murder, whatever. But there's actually a code for a paranormal element to the case, and I thought that was very interesting. In Florida, I think it was 10. And so I reached out I did a blanket search of first responders, and I said, have you guys had any experiences that you want to share? And I was bombarded, with here's what happened to me, here's what happened to me. Again, not saying it was a ghost, not saying it was a demon, but this is what happened. I could never explain it. And most of them didn't report that part of what had gone down. They just said, hey, here's the scene. I'm not going to share anything. But there was one retired detective who said, look, I had stuff happen and I didn't want it to happen, but damn it if it didn't just keep happening. It's like every other case was like paranormal. And he goes, what is this? He never had an interest. He didn't believe in it, but it kept happening. And unfortunately, they were pretty horrific as well. So I took those stories and again, took the crux of them. And then I wrote Ghost Crimes, which is 6 cases where Detective Burke is the main character, and he's just so unreluctantly is experiencing these paranormal cases, and they're tied into unfortunately children being hurt and some other things. And it's not too dark, but it does have its dark moments, and he's battling his own demons from his loss in the past. So he's socially awkward on top of it, so he's really a hard luck case. So I brought in some reinforcements. There's a second detective in the book, and then I brought some other folks in there to support him, and the book did really well. And again, it was my nod to the first responders who have to go home and go, I don't know what to make of what just happened. People will tell you that they walked in and saw somebody being flung from wall to wall by an invisible hand. There's no one else in the room, but they don't go back and report that. Nobody wanted to be the spooky Mulder, of the time. And so anyway, the book did really well. I wrote that, and then I really just fell in love with the characters, and I still had all these stories left over from the first responders. So I published Ghost Crimes 2 last year, and I added an element to it. So I continued the story of the main characters, but I gave them a counseling, sort of like an AA meeting, but it's for first responders or nurses or just anybody in that field that's helping people that experience some sort of paranormal experience and they don't know who to talk to. And so I gave them that, and that's how I was able to kind of pepper the story with all these experiences that may not necessarily tie into the main story all that well. Some of them did, but at least I was able to get those stories out there and really tell some of the things that these folks experience.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? That's I like that a lot. I like that you incorporate that. And my personal experiences, nurses have some great paranormal stuff.
Yep, I got a couple nurse responses, and and a friend of mine, his wife's a nurse, and she used to work the overnight shift, so she had all kinds of crazy stuff happening.
So where can people find your books if they're interested?
So all my books are available on Amazon.com, and they're also on Audible. So if you prefer to listen to your books, like I said, I really have a lot of respect for these folks that they leave their home and they put their life on the line for strangers, right? And they leave their families behind, and especially the folks in the military. So I wrote a book called Haunted Tampa, and it basically talks about the haunted buildings and businesses in Tampa throughout the years, and most of them are located in our Ybor City district. And it was just a fun book to write, and it didn't take a lot it was more of a book report because I wasn't like adding my skills to it so much. So all the proceeds of the sales of that go to the Wounded Warrior Project. So
Oh, nice.
I push the book pretty heavily here in Tampa and to support those folks. So every month you'll see that post on my Facebook page. So if anybody wants to check it out, I'm on Facebook at Gare Allen and also Instagram, same thing, Gare Allen.
So what do you have coming up for yourself? Are you have any projects you're working on?
Oh yeah. So so I've decided that Ghost Crimes would make an amazing Netflix series. So I'm writing a screenplay. I'm converting it to a screenplay. And I actually wrote the outline for Ghost Crimes 3 for the book. So I'm in the process of those two projects on top of a full-time job. But I'm really excited because I really, like I said, I really think that it would make a good Netflix series and maybe a movie, but I'd really prefer to see it as a series because of the development of the characters. I've had a lot of fun with them, and I think it would be very enjoyable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man, that would be really cool to see it come out on Netflix. I think movies now aren't what they used to be unless they're the big blockbusters like the Avengers and some of the other Marvel movies and DC movies. Um, Movies aren't what they used to be, you know. And I think that has a lot to do with streaming. So I think that's where everything's at now, streaming.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I can't even remember the last movie I went to go see, and I used to be a big movie buff prior to COVID. And the last movie I can't remember what was the last movie I went to go see, and it was right when they started reopening everything, so I went to go see it. Um, I don't even remember what it was.
I've started to go back, but to be honest with you, I prefer to watch my movies at home unless it's something that has to be big screen. Like you got to
Right,
see the Avengers on the big screen, right?
right,
I mean, it's
right.
just too big of a movie to watch at home. So I'll watch it again at home later, but initially I got to see it on the big screen. But the last movie I saw was the most recent Jurassic Park, and I was disappointed because it just didn't have what all the other ones had. It was,
Right.
and there was so much going on because they brought the old cast and the new cast together, and it was 2.5 hours long, so they had time to do it, but it was really a weak story. And again, I don't mean to be a writer snob, but it wasn't clever, like some of the past ones, and so I was really disappointed. But before that, I had seen the Doctor Strange, so I collected Marvel comics as a kid, so I'm a Marvel nerd. So then of course Spider-Man before that, and those were amazing.
Well, yeah. The Spider-Mans were good, but I don't. The last time I saw a Spider-Man movie was Tobey Maguire in the theater. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't even see the other ones, and I think the other ones were just as good, if not better. But
oh
yeah,
yeah.
I saw those. I saw the first. What was it? Infinity Wars. I saw that at a drive-in in New Braunfels, Texas. Yeah. Um,
No.
yeah, I don't remember the last movie I went to go see. But my son keeps telling me I need to go see Doctor Strange. I need to go see, Thor: Love and Thunder, which I'm a fan of that stuff. I just haven't had a chance to go to the. I don't know if I want to go to the theaters anymore.
I've got Yeah, I got tickets for Thor for tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
So I like to go in the afternoon when it's not busy, and then I always go see
Mm,
it. It's not IMAX. What is the other one? Oh, Dolby. So I see it in Dolby
okay.
because you can actually get your own seat. You can pick your seat, and
Yeah.
they're kind of vinyl, so you can clean it if you want to with a wipe again. And if you're post-COVID concerned, it's not cloth, so you can kind of do a nice little sanitization of it.
Did you see the latest Batman with what's that
I
guy's name?
didn't, and I hate to say it, but it's like there's one Batman story. It's like the same thing over and I know his origin, and its origin's been told so many times. I guess I'm just tired of it. And I hate to say
Yeah.
that because I love comic books, but I don't know. So no, I didn't give it a shot. I'm sure it's wonderful, but I didn't watch it.
Yeah, my people that I know tell me that it's wonderful. I tried to watch it. I couldn't get past the first 30 minutes. Yeah, it's not the Batman that
No, why
I'm
not?
used to. I just thought it was boring. I thought it was so boring and so long and so slow. Yeah, I just didn't like it. I didn't even like the
Yeah,
fight scene.
like I said, it's the Batman. The same thing with Superman. Really, Superman's been told that same story over and over. It's
Yeah,
like I don't know, just tired of it, I guess.
Yeah. Which I'm glad they got away from with the Spider-Man. They quit telling how he became Spider-Man. They just went straight to the storyline. So you know,
Yeah,
yeah, because I was like, okay, I know how he became Spider-Man. He got bit by a spider. Quit showing us that.
yeah, yeah. Awkward teenager, married date. Okay, we got it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's get to some action. But I like the Spider-Man movies, and I actually like the Wolverine movies too. Wolverine was my favorite comic growing up.
Oh,
So,
I really enjoyed the X-Men movies, and the Wolverine especially was amazing. But they did a
yeah,
really good job with the X-Men movies for sure.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, man. Coming up at the end of the hour, anything you want to say to the folks? Any words of wisdom you want to part?
Things are so crazy right now in the world. Lots to be down about, lots to get frustrated or even angry about for sure. And we just, I got to do it to myself. I got to check myself. Some days I have a great job and I get to work from home and I have time to, write, which is my passion. And excuse me, I have rescue dogs that are amazing, and there's so many. Someone said to me one time, when I was complaining, about God knows what, and they said, look to your blessings, and they said it at the right time because I realized how I was choosing to be negative. And yes, there are things that are bad out there, but I was choosing to really be negative. And Facebook is a lot of fun. You have to have humor. You have to be able to laugh at yourself and laugh at everything. And it's the jokes, the great memes about the price of gas. It's like, yes, it hurts. I get it. It
Yeah,
is when you fill up, it hurts, but we got to have fun with it because it's a reality, right? So you got to kind of find that positive spin and keep your energy up. And I think, if for nothing else, when you're negative, I think you allow yourself to allow, sickness in, and, that's not good. We don't want that. So, we're all out here doing our thing, being us and pursuing our passions. And that's why I love podcasts, because we can share different cities, different perspectives, different interests, but we're all under the same umbrella, right? We're all doing our thing. And so it's a lot of fun. So just stay positive as much as you can.
yeah. I think that's a good point. Especially you talked about if you're negative all the time, you don't allow yourself to grow. And if anything, you wilt away and you become bitter, and you're no fun to be around. And,
Yep.
uh,
And I had a channeling session one time, and this disembodied spirit is talking to me, and a very interesting experience. But they said that in the spiritual world, like attracts like. So what you put out there comes back to you.
right.
So if you're putting out positivity, you'll get positivity back. And I have a thunderstorm here, and my power just went out.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe that's a sign.
Hey, there's
your
this.
your spirits are like, hey, don't be giving away these secrets. You know? Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
Well,
I was I was waiting for my power to go out. We actually got thunderstorms rolling through here too. But okay, cool, man. Um, Thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. We gotta have you on again, dude. Yeah, I would love to talk more about the channeling stuff. If your spirits will let you do that.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate the invite. We'll definitely hook up again together
Yeah,
soon. So thank you so much.
yeah. And if you want to drop the links for your books, and I'll share them.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, guy. All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining, and I appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week. And you have a good night, Gary.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Bye bye.
Bye.